Yeah. Test. 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 Zero. For some reason, the
go through to where you introduce us all, and if there's a little bit of lag there, then I retweak it a little bit using that as another check.
That's how I've been doing it when I'll do the edits.
Let's get this show on the road.
If there's a little
Let's
bit
get
Yes.
this party started. I wanted to talk more smack.
Using that as another check.
That's how I've
Sorry,
been doing it
drug-free over here.
when I'll do the edits.
Let's get this show on the road.
Moving right along.
For it.
I wanted to talk more smack.
Using that.
What are we waiting for? I missed it.
Check.
That's how I've
Sorry,
been doing it
drug-free over here.
We're not waiting for anything.
Let's get.
Oh, we're waiting on me.
Yeah, we're waiting on you, Leo.
Okay. I guess I'll do this show.
Using that.
I guess.
I don't think we've got an audio of the intro music, so I'll have to
No.
put that in after.
Let's get
Yeah,
this show.
that's fine with me. I don't know. I heard silence and I was like, wait a minute, what did I miss? Okay.
We're missing you, Leo.
I know. Okay, if we're ready, I'll go in 3. This is mintCast, a podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. We record every other week on Sunday afternoons. Watch the mintCast website for the schedule. This episode is being recorded on Sunday, May 19th, 2019. Livestream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. If we're in the mintcast channel, or we are in the mintcast channel in IRC at irc.spotchat.org. If you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us on MeWe, on Facebook, post at the Mintcast subreddit, chat with us on Telegram, Discord, or post directly at mintcast.org. And since Bo's not here, he knows Arch. Welcome to mintCast episode 309. This is Leo, and with me today I have Joe.
Hello.
I have Josh.
Hello.
The return of Tony Watts.
Hello.
We have Tony Hughes.
Hi, guys.
And Moss.
Don't worry about me, Nan. I'll be all right.
And first up in our wanderings this episode, I get some new gear and kernel upgrades. Tony Hughes is back home and lugging again. Moss gets a new printer and some recording gear. Josh is jet setting to France next week. Joe's gaming more and heading to Texas Linux Fest on the 31st of this month. And Tony Watts is looking for a cheap server and trying RetroPie ports. Then, in the news, we have lots of releases like Rel 8 and plenty of vulnerabilities. In our innards section, we talk virtualization, and finally, plenty of feedback and lots of check this out stuff. So this week, I haven't been up to too much. I think I'd start every show that way. I don't know. It feels like I don't have a lot to do all the time, but I don't know. I'm always tinkering with something. And this fortnight, I've been tinkering with, I got some new gear. I had been using for a long time. Well, I very first started out with a Blue Snowball, then upgraded a little bit after that to a Blue Yeti, and they were good microphones. Honestly, I still record my other show with the Blue Snowball because it's so portable. But I had decided I guess it was really just scratching at my brain. Bo was talking about it weeks and weeks ago about his gear and how he's got it all set up and the different types of equipment and the quality that you can get. And one of the things that I had been looking at was moving away from pure USB microphones to an XLR type setup. And so I finally pulled the trigger on some of that. I've been looking for weeks and I wanted to start cheaply. And when you're talking XLR, I guess cheap is kind of a relative term, but I started with some low-end XLR gear and I got myself a Behringer UM2, which is just a single XLR in with an additional instrument in where I can plug in, like, I don't know, a soundboard. And I got an MXL 990 mic. I was looking at the MXL 770, I think it was, and then I saw the reviews on it, and it was great for a sub $100 mic, and I was like, ooh, I think this is going to be the one that I get. And then I saw some of the recommendations below where I was about to buy it, and it said, hey, for $2 extra, you can take a huge step up to the 990. So I did. It cost me $2 extra, and I got the next step up, and I think it sounds quite good. But I'm still getting everything calibrated because this little audio interface, this UM2, is it's not quite as good on the high end. So if I get loud, it'll start to clip a little bit, and I'm just trying to figure out how best to deal with that. And I think I'm doing pretty good. You might get some, we'll probably fix it in post, honestly, but you might get some distortion or something as I'm still trying to figure this out. So cut me a little slack, and we'll see how this goes.
Nice. It's similar to what I'm using, actually. I'm using old school M audio breakout box, and there's a gain volume on mine that you have to have just right to avoid clipping.
Yes, and that was the entire deal. And I think I don't know if this is a thing, but I guess you have to learn how to speak into a mic when it's not just your I won't say bottom of the barrel or anything like that, but a Yeti's just meant to plug into your computer and you're just supposed to start talking into it like immediately, right? Without too much adjustment. And there's just more to think about and more to do with this kind of equipment. So yeah, it's a learning process. But
No, I'm still loving my Samsung Meteor.
yeah, and so as I was looking at this stuff, I was like, well, what can I do portable wise? And then that one kept coming up for like $40. And I'm like, so if I'm ever on the road while I have to do a show, that might be a good way to do it.
Yeah, built-in stand if you want to keep it that way, or it does
Yeah.
have the screw-in for a full articulated arm.
Yeah. And that was one thing that I had to figure out. This MXL 990 came with a shock mount for itself. And, I think I'm just an idiot, but I thought like maybe you had to screw it in or something. Like it's just a clip. You just grab the clip and it opens up and you slide it in and it's like it's dead easy. But yeah, I don't know. I spent way too long looking at that thing trying to figure it out. So yeah, now that I know how to do it, I feel kind of dumb. But anyway, I've got the other thing that I've been doing this week is getting everything upgraded to kernel 5.0. So for those of you that might not know by now, Linux Mint has a kernel utility that allows you to upgrade within the software updater. And one of the things that it'll allow you to do is upgrade to the later kernels. So 5.0 is the current latest kernel that Linux Mint offers you, and it's the hardware enablement kernel that comes with Ubuntu. So it's not out of band or anything like that. But it's just so easy to get it done. So you open up the Linux kernels thing, click on the version that you want, and click update, and you're done. You reboot, and you're done. So 5.0 came out a couple of weeks ago, and so this last week I decided to go ahead and upgrade everything to it. I didn't need to upgrade my two desktops. I have one at work that isn't mine, but I run Mint on it. I've got my desktop here at home that I play my games on, and then I have my laptop. And the laptop is the only one that actually really benefited from 5.0, and it was the battery life stuff. There's some battery life improvements in it. But anyway, yeah, not a whole lot of nothing broke. That was awesome. But I think Tony might have some something to say about that. So with that, Tony, welcome back. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you very much. Yes, well, since I got back from Woodbrook, I went to my lug yesterday, as you've already said. And while I was there, I was playing around with an old Dell 15-inch laptop, which 10 years ago would have been one of the top of the range Core 2 Duo machines with a dedicated graphics card. But it's a bit past its sell-by date now, so the guy who used to own it has donated it to the club. And I decided to stick an SSD in it and have a play around with it. And I managed to get Fedora 29 Mate spin running on it. And it installed great. On first boot after install, it booted in 50 seconds from pressing the power button, which I thought was quite good for a 10-year-old laptop. And yeah, I was quite impressed actually, particularly as it was Fedora and it's not a OS that I'm particularly familiar with, so I haven't got a lot of experience of boot times and stuff like that. But yeah, that was good. And then, like you've just mentioned, I've been playing around with kernel 5.0 on my desktop machine, installed it a couple of days ago, and it broke my NVIDIA driver. Not that I've got anything posh on this machine. It's a very old, I think it probably a 750 meg NVIDIA graphics card, but it's the only graphics card I've got because there isn't an onboard one on this machine. So I had installed the proprietary driver on the previous, when I installed the Linux Mint originally. But when I came to reboot after the install of 5.0, I was met with a desktop that didn't look very good at all. So I went into the settings and realized it might be a driver issue. went into the driver settings, went back to the open source driver, and that cured the issue on reboot. So quite pleased about that. I'm not particularly worried about this machine because when 19.2 comes around, I'm going to use that as a opportunity to reconfigure the machine, and I might even get a better graphics card. So yeah, that's what I've been doing the last week since I got home from. And I've been making jam. I brought a load of rhubarb home from Woodbrook with me, so I made jam the first couple of days after I got back as well. So yeah, that's me.
Oh, that's going to be tasty.
It is very. So,
And-
Moss. Oh, go on.
Oh, well, as you know, it's printer week. After a lot of advice, I got a Canon Pixma TS9210, and I could not get it installed. I made some headway, hit a brick wall, got some help, hit another brick wall, got more advice, which didn't help. I called Canon, and they said, oh, we don't even pay somebody to learn about Linux, so we're not going to help you. And so I called Amazon. And what with the ink already installed, they told me to keep the printer and gave me a full refund. So I ordered a Brother MFC J481, that's 491 DW. It cost me an additional 55 cents. It's up and running on all 4 of my distros as well as on my wife's machine. Easy peasy once you know how to do Brother installation, which does require the use of terminal. I did get a lot of people recommending HP printers despite my pleas for them not to do so. But my bottom line on printers is be careful before you buy a new Pixma, and Brother is best. Boy, I wish I could get paid for all these sponsor-like comments. I did get a new bomb and I can't even talk today. I got a new boom and pop filter to aid in my podcasting. It was quite inexpensive and maybe a bit small and maybe not the best quality gooseneck, but it seems to be working. If you're on a budget like I am, I would recommend the setup. I got it on eBay. The company is Neewer. That'll be in the show notes. I've been working on my review of Linux Lite 4.4 for Distro Hopper's Digest Episode 2 to be recorded at the end of May. And next month, I don't know what I'm going to look at. I'm thinking about maybe Clear Linux OS or Saboyan. Saboyan looks really good, but I start looking at the package manager and you have to pretty much almost compile it from source. And so that kind of put me off a bit, but it looks really nice as a live boot.
So I'm going to come in here because I get criticised for calling Mate mate because that's an Italian. It should be Sabion because it's named after the sauce. So
well, there's an O in there, so I thought it was French actually, Sabayon.
I think it's Italian. The spin.
Okay, no biggie. I've been wrong before.
I think
It'll
I'm on
happen
that
again.
boom arm.
Ah,
I was looking up your boom arm, Moss. Those are really affordable. I think I may just pull the trigger on that too.
Yep, and it comes with the pop filter included in the price.
Nice.
I've only gotten 3 donations to date in the fundraiser to get me to Southeast Linux Festival. There is a link in the show notes. The fundraiser was started by a listener, Jackie Moore. I am very grateful that a few listeners understood my need and responded. Getting to self would help me promote mintCast and perhaps make some inroads into a career in computers for me. Only about $125 has been raised to date, including 1 donation through PayPal. And unless I get at least $500, I simply can't go. But here's a problem. GoFundMe disperses donations every week, if any, and it's my job to manage the funds. There's no way to send refunds, especially to anonymous donors, and so far all 3 of them on GoFundMe are anonymous. So I have to decide what to do with the money if I don't get enough to go. After much discussion with my wife and the mintCast team, any money not used to send me to self, including if we go over, any money not used will be sent as a donation from mintCast, divided between Linux Mint and archive.org. I will make the decision to go or not on May 31st, as that's about the latest I could get good rates on hotel rooms for a June 14 to 16 convention. That's about all I got. What's Josh up to these days?
Yeah, so this week I have been preparing for a talk in France. Well, it's in a town called city, I don't know, called Lyon, one of the bigger cities there, and I'm going to be giving a talk on open source, and basically going from the first line of code to having a fully packaged, published um, open source project. So I'll be going through. I've just made a list of GitHub. So talking about how to use the different tools in that, different licensing stuff that you can do, publishing. So that's like going through where you've got GitHub, GitLab, SourceForge, or you could host it yourself. Packaging, so it's going to be from a Python project perspective. So I'll be talking about pip and PyPI or PyPy, however you want to pronounce it. Also talking about building a community around the project, and also some monetization techniques like Patreon, and also sharing some tips from what I've learned, and also taking the open source kind of term from a non-software perspective even. So open source doesn't have to be like writing code. It can be designing a logo, fixing spelling mistakes, and kind of looking at it from a non-developer point of view. I have also been playing around with Bytemark hosting, and we have to thank them because they have donated us a WordPress server, as a few readers and also the mintCast team have decided that it's time to update the website from 2011 era. So I've been working on that, setting up WordPress on the server, and also working on a website redesign. I think we'll include a screenshot of that in the show notes if possible, for people to have a look at and give their feedback. Also post it on Discord and MeWe and all those sort of places. I also received an Adafruit Pi portal. This is one of their new boards. So if you're not familiar with Adafruit, they're a big company in America who do electronics and maker type stuff. And PyPortal is an internet connected Python display, so you can actually code Python, and it's got like I think it's a 4-inch LCD display on the front, and it's a fully fledged Python device that you can run Python on. So I made a Eurovision countdown timer. So for the Americans on the podcast, that's kind of like basically every country in Europe submits a song, and Tony Hughes might know what that is. I've also been playing around with some photography stuff. So I have been investing in some photography gear. So I'll just walk you through kind of the setup that I've got. I got a new photography light, which is like it's like a big rectangle with like a honeycomb light design. And it's got an LCD where you can control the color and the brightness. I've also bought a camera slider from the company Neewer, so it's the same thing that Moss's pop filter came from, and that's been working really well. So just trying to get a photography setup right at the minute. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. What has Joe been up to?
Oh, you know me, not much. I was at my lug yesterday, and it was interesting because I ended up helping somebody with their setup of VirtualBox on Fedora. And I just wanted to bring it to the show in case anybody else is having the same problem. His issue was a bricked update. He tried to do an update, but only a part of it would update. So the solution ended up being completely uninstalling VirtualBox and then reinstalling it. Not doing a purge, though, which allowed him to keep his data, and once he reinstalled, all of his images were available in the interface again. other than that, I've been testing out the Xbox One controller on Linux per request from last show. It's working much better than it used to than the first time I hooked it up to a Linux box, but still not as good as the Xbox 360 controller. So, the only difference being that the Xbox 360 controller has vibration working. And then I know I brought up my Air Force Z2s on the show a couple of times. These are headphones that I initially picked up at the Goodwill for computer parts. And they're great. I mean, large ear cups, good sound, quality connectors. But I had an issue where my son chewed through, or mostly through, the cables on my headset, and so I tried to order more cables for it because it's got a great breakaway connector, and he chewed after the breakaway point. So tried to order, couldn't get, ordered a whole new headset, got that for $17, and that did give me another cable and another headset because you cannot find the cables for it anymore. But now I have two headsets and only one cable between them. So I went looking for alternatives, and Turtle Beach had a X07 controller for one of their Air Force headsets, that or a cable for one of their headsets that looked to be really close. The only problem was it ended up being male-to-male connection, so that didn't work. But looking closely at the connection, I knew I had seen it before. It turned out that it's a standard PS2 connector. So I ordered a couple of those I ordered two of those X07 cables, and got two of the
Hey, Josh, mute your mic, please.
Oops.
and got two of the PS2 female-to-female adapters, and it works great. Sound goes through, mic works fine. I even used it yesterday on our meeting. And also, I picked up another Turtle Beach, I think it was the 60p headset for my daughter, and it comes with a USB DAC, and that thing worked beautifully. So, and I couldn't find any more of those either. I went online and looked, and the cheapest price you can get those for is like $20 to $30, but you can find them. But we picked up her headset for $5. So that was a pretty good deal. And okay, let's see. I've been playing a lot with OBS and IceCast, but I haven't been able to get them to work together yet. I'm gonna have to talk to Bo and see if he has any suggestions. I wanted to do a stream other than the one that's just to YouTube. I wanted to make sure we had an alternative, but I can get it set up. I can follow the tutorials on it, and it looks like it works. And then you go to the page, and it looks like it's loading, and then nothing happens. So I'm going to keep working at it until I get it. Other than that, I am planning on going to Texas Linux Fest at the end of the month. I don't know what the listeners on here might like for me to get from there, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to record while I'm there. So I take ideas if you guys want me to go to. I'm planning on going to the Kubernetes talks and maybe bring some of that back with me. And I'm planning on spending a lot of time at our local lug is going to have a booth there, so I'm probably going to spend a lot of time there just doing the whole meet and greet thing. And I don't know what anybody would like for me to get out of that to bring back for the show.
You need to bring me back some stickers.
Yeah, well, I'm planning on getting swag now. Whether I share or not, I'm not certain. And then I have been working on two other things, and I think we're going to have to do another Raspberry Pi show because I was working on that all yesterday evening because I saw that I saw a video online of somebody that had ported Android Auto to the Raspberry Pi 3.
What?
Oh.
With they were using a 7-inch capacitive screen. I don't have the 7-inch capacitive screen, or no, that was not the capacitive, but the resistive screen. I have a 2.8-inch capacitive screen, one of the first ones from Adafruit, and it was hooked up to one of the Pi 1s that I have. So I pulled that off of there and I put it onto the Raspberry Pi that I'm using Berry Boot on, but I could not get the screen to work on there. And I think it's actually an issue with the fact that it is using Berry Boot. So the OS is on the thumb drive instead of on the SD card. So my next step will be to get another micro SD card and put it on there and see if I can get that screen to work with the Raspberry Pi 3. It was working just fine with the one. And Adafruit still has a really good write-up on how to set it up. So I'm going to give that another try. And I don't know how well Android Auto will work on the smaller screen, but I think if it does work decent, I'm going to make the investment to get the larger screen and set that up in my car, since, you know, my, 2002 Buick doesn't have the greatest stereo in the world.
That sounds awesome. I want to hear more about it. And I think we should do the Pi Projects podcast like quarterly just because.
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be a couple of recurring themes, and I think virtualization is going to turn out to be one of them. So then pies, yeah. So we'll just do like a pie and then a virtualization show right back to back.
Yeah. Okay. And I wanted to talk about Batacera, but I think I'm going to do that in a different section. And it was originally brought up on the Ubuntu podcast, but like I said, I'm going to bring that up in a different section. Tony Watts, what have you been up to?
I have been listening to mintCast, and it's a funny thing when you're listening in the car and you want to say something, you guys don't hear me. It doesn't work the same way, but it's still good.
Scream louder.
I'll try it. I'll work on it.
You just think we don't hear you.
Ooh, that's a scary thought. If you guys hear me in the car, then, you'll be entertained. That's all I got to say. But
you didn't see that camera we had on the corner of the windshield?
I knew I shouldn't have had the Google Infotainment Center put in. Damn it. Anyway, I've been up to a whole lot of stuff, and really most of this is just the last couple weeks, not even going back to some of the time I've missed, but had a music gig last weekend that was pretty fun. It was a big metal show, really, and my band is probably not as heavy as some of those on the bill, but it was a whole lot of fun. It was an all-day thing. So that was good. I've been doing some home repairs, trying to do some bathroom remodels and stuff. Some of the next few things I want to talk about are all phone related. My OnePlus 3T, my beloved OnePlus, finally had a crack in the screen that was starting to cause problems with touch, and I had to take it into the shop, which I bought a replacement screen and I was going to attempt replacing it myself. The idea scared me too much, so I took it to the shop, and that's been interesting. They're now attempting like their third reassemble because of various problems. So anyway, they're not charging me anymore, I don't think, but they work on these devices very seldom, as you might guess. So I told them time is not an issue for me. I'm using the Nexus 5 as a backup right now, and I hope I get it back working properly one of these days. I switched phone carriers as well. I was using Ting, which Ting has been great for my family for about 2 years, but I have teenagers and preteens, and they like to use their data. So I finally took the plunge and went to T-Mobile.
And it sounds like you're on the road more, so that leaves you outside of the range of Wi-Fi, and data does get expensive on Ting.
Yeah, and which for me was kind of okay because that OnePlus has like 128 gigs of storage on it, and I would just download podcasts and all kinds of stuff to it offline, and that worked. But the kids want to use their phones, and I guess maybe I was just feeling nice, so we went ahead and got the unlimited plan. And speaking of phones for the kids, I am amazed at what you can do these days with such little money. I bought a phone for one of my kids within the last couple weeks, and it's a Moto E5 Play, which is last year's budget phone, I think, and I also think it retailed for like 150-ish. I got it new in box, carrier unlocked from eBay for $80, and it's a pretty capable device, and I'm just impressed that you can do that for that cheap. Granted, in this time, it's weird to have a device that has that phone jack on top and a micro USB charge and no fingerprint sensor and some of these kinds of things. 2 gigs of RAM as well, so a little limited. But I mean, again, for under $100, not a lot to complain about there. It holds an SD card for expandable storage. So that takes care of a lot of the phone limitation right there. That's just crazy to me. I don't know. You can, for under $100, get something that is pretty capable. It seems like it moves just fine. One of the things that came with that, and I know we try not to praise Google too much here, but there is a feature that I found that I really like, and I hope this may come to like Librem services or something someday. Have any of you guys used the Google Family Link, the parental stuff?
I'm
Say that I
gonna.
have.
I'm gonna out myself again. I'm on an iPhone, so no.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't either, and part of that is because it requires Nougat or above. But I went ahead and did that and installed it on the kids' devices and mine and stuff. And it allows you to set content filtering and set screen times and lock the phones. That's, I guess, kind of standard stuff maybe you would expect to be able to do, but let me tell you, we didn't tell them it was coming, and they had a bedtime set into the phone, and they got a 15-minute warning before lights out on the device. Oh, that was very entertaining.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was really good.
How old?
17 and 11.
Ouch. Okay, I can understand with the 11-year-old, but did it to the 17-year-old too?
Yeah, but it's that's the oldest one is the special needs kids, so they're kind of really kind of closer to mental age, I guess. So I don't know, but they both got that warning at the same time, and both had a similar reaction. It was pretty entertaining. The Kindle Fire tablet that I've been using, I thought this was kind of interesting. I'm only a fan of the price of the device, honestly. They're very cheap, and I use it to do a couple different things, just an e-reader and a couple other things. But I don't like the interface, and I guess that's one of the things we probably have in common as Linux users. It's your programs are important, but the layout and the interface and all of that experience is important. And I, of course, don't like Amazon's. So I was using something called Launcher Hijack, which allows you to use an Android launcher like Nova Launcher instead of Amazon's stuff. And Amazon finally blocked it. So,
well, that's a pain. Yeah, I keep my Fire going. I hate the interface. I was using Nova Launcher on it. I was disappointed in how few of the open source programs there were to actually run on it. And of course, if there was anything on Google I needed to use, their in most cases they wouldn't run on it anyhow. Even though Kindle Fire OS is just a spin of Google Android.
Yeah. I found that you can install you can install like the third-party open source stores on it and stuff because it is Android underneath basically. But as far as the launcher hijack, it didn't take long. I did a quick search, and somebody on XDA forums had already repackaged the APK for launcher hijack, and all it really does differently is the name of what's running in the background is changed to something different, so that it's not blocked because Amazon specifically blocked the name of the one service that's running, right? So it works again. so more Linux related than I have been playing around with some stuff on the ports on the RetroPie, and I kind of mentioned this last time. If you go into the optional packages in RetroPie, you can install ports where you can install like Doom and Duke Nukem and Quake and stuff like that. And Kodi is one of the things that you can install. That's been kind of neat to have on the arcade cabinet. I can, stream video to it if I want to, and it kind of sits in the off of the kitchen. And there are a few fun things in there. There's a port for Super Mario War, kind of a Mario two-player battle game that's like a fan-made game. That's pretty fun too.
This is something I'm kind of interested in as well because I run it separately. I have a little computer connected up to my TV, and I just have, I guess it's RetroArch and Kodi as separate installs. So you're saying that is it RetroArch? Is that what you said?
It's basically you can install within the menu of RetroPie. You can go into optional packages. Yeah, in RetroPie itself, you can install Kodi.
I was saving this for later, but since we're talking about it now, I'll bring it up. Batacera also has Kodi like pre-installed. You click a button and it switches from the RetroArch front end looking like RetroPie, and it goes straight into Kodi.
Super sweet.
Yep. Yeah, that's the answer. I think I've found the answer. I need this.
Nice. And
there is no answer.
I'll just have to go ahead and say it. I mean, the real reason I'm on this podcast is I can just throw things out to get technical consulting on the air. Why not? But I've been exploring options for a really cheap server, and I think what I'm looking to do is load up an old desktop PC to use as a media and file server. And I think I can get away with using something that has I've got plenty of machines here that are single core processor and some really old things really that I haven't powered on in a long time. And I basically, I think I'm going to put 2 4 terabyte drives in it and have it serve up files. I haven't decided what I'm going to run yet. I was thinking about running like like Ubuntu or something like that. So you guys probably have some thoughts on that.
And it's gonna turn into a NAS basically.
Yes, sir.
So I've been testing out Fedora 30 server for this, and it's running really good. But I think Ubuntu would be any kind of flavor of Ubuntu would be good as well. But yeah. I guess it depends on whether you're running it headless or not.
You'll end up running other stuff on it anyway.
My only thought on that, if you're going to use a very old single core machine, is power use.
Right.
You might be better off going a little bit more recent and getting a Core 2 Duo or something like that, and that's going to use less power, especially if you're going to have it on 24/7.
So is this going to be a desktop or a repurposed laptop?
Well, actually, I could do either, but I was thinking desktop so I could put the spinning hard drives in it.
Headless?
I can go headless, yeah.
Okay. Well, then, yeah, I would definitely go with Ubuntu Server because that's what it's made for. But I would also install X2Go Server just so that I could use thin clients with it. And then probably Mate.
And I would throw my hat in the ring for Fedora 30 because Cockpit is amazing. You should definitely try it out. It works on Ubuntu, but not all the features work. I tried to do, I think like the virtualization plugin or something like that, and it got all kinds of borked. So Fedora is where it's at for all of the features of Cockpit. Otherwise, it works fine.
Well, that gives me a few things to play with. Appreciate that. I think that's about it for me. We can talk some news.
All right. All right, so we've got a couple of weeks worth of news. So by the time you're hearing this, some of these stories may actually be a little crusty. But yeah, let's just start at the top and work our way down. We've got quite a bit to go through. We'll keep it quick. So RHEL 8 is released. The headline feature of this one is that they've got a new focus after the acquisition of CoreOS. They've got a new focus on containers. So this is just the slow moving of RHEL. I think everybody got onto the container bandwagon like a couple of years ago, if not longer than that ago. But yeah, the slower cadence of RHEL 8 means that they release it now. You'll see a new kernel 4.18. You'll see Python 3 as the default. And if your enterprise has money to burn, it can support up to 4 petabytes of RAM, up from 64 terabytes of RAM in RHEL 7. Like that's yeah. I don't have anything near worthy that much RAM, so that's just one of those things. And further on, we have Ubuntu Touch OTA 9 is out now. I think this is a maintenance release, but we were talking to Tony Watts yesterday. Did you get a chance to test it out?
I gave it a shot, and it's interesting. I've tried a few of I've tried Ubuntu Touch, and I've tried out installation of Plasma Mobile, and Ubuntu Touch. The installation is, in my experience, has really been very, very easy, and that's one of the things I like about it. The installer is great. I didn't get a successful install. I got as far as I basically the whole thing ran and said it should be good to go, but the phone wouldn't boot, and I'm not really sure why. But the installation process, and in fairness, I haven't really spent a lot of time with it to troubleshoot that, but the process is pretty cool. One of the things that's changed since the last time I've had a go with it is the installation is available as a deb, as a snap, or as an app image, all from the download page. So I gave a few of those a try. The app image wouldn't open. I ended up going with the deb, and the UBports installation program for Ubuntu, that was all working just fine. But for whatever reason, the phone would not boot after I finished that process, and I just did that this morning. So I have not really gotten back to it. But one of the things I did notice that was one of the bigger bugs the last time I had to go around with this was the camera would freeze after you take a picture. And they have apparently fixed that. I think that might have been specific to the Nexus 5. There's also been some layout improvements, so I was looking forward to giving it a spin, but alas, it did not work out just yet.
What a bummer. But I guess the other couple of things was that, well, the only other thing that I've got written down here is that they added paste and go. And I think this is referencing like when you have a URL on your clipboard and when you paste it into like the address bar in Firefox or something like that, there's a paste and go. So instead of having to paste and then hit enter. So, little tiny paper cut things that make stuff a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just glad to see that it's moving forward, really. We have a few options in the cooker for some open hardware coming down the line, and the more these projects advance, the better that's going to be when we have those options available. So I'm really glad to see the work continue.
Yeah, I don't like Google enough to go back to a Google phone, but I also don't really like Apple either. So the moment that I have a fully functional, usable Linux-based, like real Linux-based, not just the Linux kernel was stolen and repurposed, like a real Linux type phone, then I think I'll be set, and I'll probably stay on that for forever and ever and ever. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I tried to use even as a backup the old installation of Ubuntu Touch that I had, or UBports, I should say. Anyway, it didn't work out. I put my phone in the shop, my OnePlus that is, and I already had the Ubuntu Touch install on this thing, and I used it for a little while, but I noticed group text messages weren't coming in. I don't know why. I looked it up and I saw on forums that some other people had the same issues. So I was kind of looking forward to going to OTA 9 and seeing if I could test and confirm if that same issue was fixed. And frankly, I don't know if it was an issue with UBports solely or not. It may be some other little nuance. But anyway, that was an issue I had trying to even use it as a backup device. All I really needed was talk and text to get me by for at least a few days. And in the text arena, I do get some group texts sometimes, and if those aren't coming through, that's a problem. So I had to go back to Android.
Yeah. Oh well, it's getting there. That's the point.
Absolutely.
And then next up, Oh, go ahead.
Oh, did you try out? I'm sorry, I missed a part of the conversation there. Did you try out your Google Voice number for texting and calling? Switching over to basically using data for everything.
I haven't. I think the thing is, so many people have my number. I didn't want to mess with that. I just wanted to pop my SIM into something else and just go that way for a little while. But I do have a Google Voice number and use it with Hangouts, and yeah, I've done that before, and it does work for sure.
Okay.
And next up, we have kernel 5.1 released with performance improvements. So this is more of if you're running on Linux Mint or Ubuntu 18.04, this is kind of, well, I guess all of the Ubuntu's really, this is kind of looking ahead, right? So this might be what we see in 1910, right? Yeah, in 1910. But we're looking at improvements in the Linux security model, which is if you're on like Red Hat distributions, you're looking at SE Linux, or if you're on Debian-based distributions, you're looking at AppArmor. And what the major feature here is Safe Set ID. And it's, without getting too much into the weeds, it basically prevents unprivileged users from giving themselves too much permission to the file system. So it keeps them nice and sandboxed away from the good bits. It also brings in some support for NVDIM, which is, if you think, I don't know if you've seen the advertisements, if you go to like Newegg or wherever to search for some hardware, you might have seen Intel Optane stuff. And these are really just really fast SSDs that you plug into a PCI bus and use it as RAM. That's exactly what this is. And then you also get some improvement in live patching. So this is going to allow you to patch your kernel without rebooting. And I don't mind a reboot, honestly. I'm not one of the ones that likes to watch that uptime just tick up and up and up and up and never stop. But it does feel kind of nice when you go like a month or something and you're like, I haven't rebooted my Linux box in a month and it's still working just fine. So some really cool stuff coming down the pike. And I'll take this opportunity to remind you that kernel 5.0 is available in the Linux Mint repository. So, well, the Ubuntu repositories, but is easy to install in Linux Mint. So go do it. And then Moss has got us some information on Open Mandriva 4 release candidate.
Well, that's about all there is right now. Open Mandriva 4 release candidate was released May 12th. It's the last step before going to stable, and I've been following this all along. I'm a fan of Open Mandriva 3.03, and 4 looks like it's going to be better if they can get all the bugs out, so we'll do more reporting on this when we get the stable.
Very cool. So, I guess this is going to be in Distro Hopper's Digest pretty soon then, huh?
It might be. I'd like it to be, but till we have a stable, I'm not going to commit to it.
For sure. All right. And then the big one, I don't know, big if you like Microsoft stuff or you're forced to use Microsoft stuff, but the Windows Subsystem for Linux version 2 is out. And before we go in for opinions, because I have a feeling there might be a few, we're looking at 20 times faster in some cases than WSL version 1, and it uses, and here's the big thing, it uses a real live Linux kernel. 4.19, so it's the long-term support. It's going to be supported for, I don't know, a long time. And if you're just itching to make it happen right now, you can compile it from the Git repository you can compile it on Windows from their Git repository. And, oh shoot, I thought I had a link in there, but if not, I'll get the link in the show notes before we post it all up. So what do y'all think about this? Are you going to use it?
Yes.
I'm not. Well, I don't think I will because I'm very restricted on what I can install on my work computer, and that's the only thing I have that's really running Windows. But right now, it's still running Windows 7, and I know we have to upgrade by the end of the year, but even then, probably not.
Okay. So I've
Yeah,
got... Go ahead.
I was going to say it won't cross my path because I'm not currently running anything with Windows 10 on it to run Windows Subsystem for Linux.
Right, and it has to be Windows 10 Pro.
Yeah, that's the other thing. So if you've got a home system, then you're not going to be able to run it anyway.
Oh,
In
that's
an
a bummer. I
open
didn't know that.
world, we need no windows or gates.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is I've been listening to a few podcasts since this news broke, and there seems to be mixed reactions in the Linux world about how good or bad this is for Linux. Some people say, well, it means it's going to be the year of the Linux desktop. Other people are saying, well, it's actually going to slow down the transition from Windows systems to people deciding to jump ship and go to Linux desktop systems. But I'm not sure it's going to make that much difference because the majority of average users out there now are doing most of their computing on portable devices like phones and tablets. So
Yeah, I guess we should probably talk more about the Chromebook stuff where you can run Linux apps on that now,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I think that's kind of the
correct.
same idea. But for me, I'll use it on the machines that I have Windows on. I run Linux on the machine that I work on, kind of day to day at my work. But I have a Windows, or is it Microsoft Surface or whatever Surface it is, like number 4, the third one, the fourth one, something like that. And I, it's not really something that I'm able to do to just go in and rip it out and put Linux on it anyway. And I don't even know that it would be compatible, but this is just something that would
It
make
is.
my life easier. Oh, okay. But yeah, this is one of those things where I'm a little restricted on what I can do with that box, but what I can do is go to the store and download and install whatever I can from there. So once it's available, it's going to be what I do. So for me, I'm already converted, so you're asking the wrong guy, I guess. But I'm definitely going to install it and use it. And one thing that I had just recently learned is that there are some, I don't know what you call them in the Windows side, but I guess drivers for SSHFS. And since that's what I'm looking at on the server, WSL2 plus SSHFS together makes me kind of forget that I'm in a Windows box half the time, I'd imagine, because just full screen the terminal and the only thing you'll notice is Windows Explorer when you're moving files around or whatever. So I'm excited to try it. I don't think it's a negative in any way. If anything, this is just proof that Linux has won. It's proof that Linux has burrowed its way into everything except Mac because they're curmudgeons and they have their walled garden and that's the only way they're gonna have it. But it's made it into Chromebook, into the Chrome OS. It's made it into Windows, and I think we're seeing uptick in the amount of questions that we see on like the support Reddits, like Linux Mint and Ubuntu. You're just seeing all these people. I see on a weekly basis a huge handful of people that are like, hey, I'm dropping Windows 10, I'm installing Linux, whatever flavor that is. And, honestly, I think we can thank Linus Tech Tips for a lot of that. But I don't think it's going to have a negative impact. I think, if anything, it's going to be positive overall. So, I don't know. We'll just have to smell the way the wind is blowing and see how it works. But I think it's going to be fine. And then Moss has some Tilix. Oh, yeah, Tilix needs a new project maintainer. So tell me something about this.
Well, why don't you just read the whole thing? I mean, really. Tilix's project maintainer has decided it does everything he wanted to do now, and he's not interested in carrying it forth. You may be aware of Tilix if you use a Budgie desktop. I know it's used in some other desktops. But if you are interested in working on a terminal project, please go for it. It's sitting there waiting for someone to either take it over or have it fade away into the distance.
Well, I guess like there would just be a lot of requests there, and if the guy kind of feels like it's feature complete, then it's feature complete. You can argue about whether or not it's feature complete, but
well, it's not whether it's feature complete, but whether he wants any of those other features. For his purposes, it's already does everything he wants it to do.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He built it. He got it to. Well, probably not alone. I'm sure, but it's where he wants it to be. And I don't know. That seems like a nice storybook ending to me, but whatever. And we have a lot more Linux conversion. So we have, in the past couple of weeks, we just saw 2 different news articles about 2 different places that are adopting Linux in government. So we have the state of Kerala in India is one of the first Indian states with 100% literacy, and they are going to be converting to Linux on the government side. So that's awesome.
On all their school systems, they have converted all of their school computers to Linux. They have their own version of school Linux.
So do they maintain it and everything?
They maintain it and everything. It's based on Ubuntu.
This starting to smell like that story out of Germany where they converted and then they converted back and it just wasn't good overall.
Well, that
or
was
whatever.
a city. This is schools.
It also sounds like that story out of North Korea where everybody's computer was required to run an outdated version of Linux that was easily monitored by the government.
Yeah, I was going to say, how else are you going to monitor all your citizens, right?
Well, Kerala says that just using it in their school systems will save them $400 million over the next few years.
I just hope that that money savings gets put back into the schools and to other things to help people out, man.
Well, at least it's not coming out of the schools.
That's true. Well, yeah, I hope so. I hope that's how it continues to be, because that's a lot of money to spend and make things so much better for everybody.
The second link in the show notes is from It's Foss, which is an Indian free open software blog and has a lot more details on how they're using it. So,
and the other group is South Korea. So with Windows 7 support ending, they have decided, the South Korean government has decided to ditch Windows entirely in favor of Linux, which is really good. I don't know that there's a whole lot of information about what they're switching to other than Linux, and I'm air quoting here. So we'll keep our ear to the ground on what they actually decide to convert over to. I'm curious about that. But another group converting to Linux, so that's good stuff.
I wanted to point out in the It's Foss article on Kerala, they also said that the school systems in Tamil Nadu, a neighboring state, have already implemented Linux. So it's spreading.
Very cool. Yeah. What else are you going to do, man? You can save a lot of money as long as you hire some competent people to manage it all. And yeah, that's just good stuff. So we've got a few vulnerabilities. There are two here that I really wanted to talk about, and then the third because we were talking about encrypted messaging last episode, and I feel like this is just an open loop, and we got to close that up. So the first one that we come up to is zombie load, and this is one that was I saw first about it maybe about a week ago or something like that. And man, oh man, if you own a Linux chip from, I don't know, it seemed to be about a decade's worth of Intel chips are all going to be affected by this. Hey, Team Red, Team AMD, that's great. But yes, but Intel has huge market penetration. So I would guess that if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have at least one Intel chip. And before I get into it, I'm sorry. I'm running on an Intel chip right now. And it stings me a little bit just to read this, but my desktop's on AMD, so half in, half out, I guess. Anyway, so this vulnerability affects Intel processors from about the first gen Core i series all the way up to the current stuff that's out right now. And the only chips that are, and I don't really want to say fully immune, but the closest that we have to immunity on the Intel side are chips that do not support hyperthreading at all. So I guess to kind of fix that up, the only real fix for this is turning off hyperthreading altogether. And if you're talking about, one of those 8-core processors with, 2 threads per core or something like that, you're talking a huge amount of performance loss in this case. But just like Meltdown, Spectre, Speculative Store Bypass, Foreshadow that came before it, Zombie Load is a way for threads on a CPU to reach out and read data from other threads. So this means that your encryption keys could potentially be compromised if they're sitting on and being processed by one of those threads. And I've got a really cool video from Red Hat that is about a 3-minute video explanation on how it all actually kind of works. And there are a bunch of links to like the Meltdown one and the Spectre one. They all kind of link together, but there are 3-minute videos on pretty much all of those. And if you got 15 minutes to sit down and watch, It is really, really interesting, and they do like the Reddit subreddit explain like I'm five. They don't talk to you like you're five, but you can sit back and with very little knowledge in computing, you can get a good grasp on what is actually happening on some of these. So zombie load bad. Oh no. And then we have vulnerabilities in kernels up to 5.0.8. So this is a semi-dangerous vulnerability that is a little bit complex to exploit. It clocked in with an exploitability score of 2.2, which essentially means you got to set some stuff up. You've got to be pretty, pretty astute to really get this exploited, but it results from a specially crafted TCP packet. So it's basically crafted network, a crafted network packet that you send to a vulnerable Linux machine, and it can lead to remote code execution, which essentially means they can run whatever they want to on your machine, and that's not good. So I believe the kernel fix is already out for it, so go update. And same with zombie load. There are some mitigations already available for the kernel, so go update. Now, we have one other vulnerability that came out in the past fortnight, and that was a WhatsApp vulnerability. We had talked about it in the last episode where we talked about encrypted messaging, and WhatsApp came up as one of the options that you had. And it seemed to come from a group that was sponsored by Israeli hackers, the Israeli government. And what basically happened was they would send a regular call to your WhatsApp app. And even if you didn't pick up, they were able to infect your WhatsApp installation, which allowed your phone to be compromised. So that's not really good. So even if you didn't notice the call coming in, you could have missed this call, it would still have affected you. So this is not a very good thing. So there's an update out for WhatsApp already. So just make sure it's updated. That's really all you need to do in this case. Does anybody actually run WhatsApp?
Yeah, I use WhatsApp all the time.
Did you get that update?
I didn't check. It runs on my phone. My phone does updates. I ignore them. But I assume it updated.
Right. And I don't know. I guess it really just kind of depends on if you haven't set to auto or whatever. I think all of my apps on my phone just kind of auto update. So
Exactly.
yeah, if it updated, it updated. If it didn't, it didn't. But I guess lucky for me that week or two that it was out there, or at least that it was known that it was out there, I wasn't really affected.
Yeah, and I only really use WhatsApp for work. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of the apps that I use are pretty much just strictly for work. Like I could probably get away with not using the Google apps altogether if I didn't have to use them for work. All right, well that's it for the news, and we'll head on over to Linux and Nerds. So Joe, I got you up first with the VirtualBox stuff. I kind of wanted to do it this way because VirtualBox seems to be the one piece of software that is recommended for new people trying to get into doing virtualization. So yeah, tell me something about some VirtualBox, how you've been dealing with it.
Well, see, I don't have as much experience with VMs as some of the other people on the show, or basically anybody. So, I mean, I like the idea of VMs. It's just I don't have much use for them. And well, with VirtualBox, there's two ways you can install it. You can grab the deb from the VirtualBox website, or you can do a sudo apt install VirtualBox-qt. And the only real difference between those two is that if you do the sudo apt install, it will get updates on its own. If you grab the deb, it will be static. And like I was saying, I usually don't have a use for VMs. I usually prefer just to do a fresh install on a device or use Docker if I need something that's isolated. But I do like functionality of being able to run a VM off of a disk drive pulled from another machine. So if I've got a machine that, the motherboard goes bad, I can pull the hard drive, I can set it up in a VM, get the data off of it, run any applications if I need to, then maybe later on attempt to put it into another machine. And I attempted to do this with that hanging Windows partition that I have on my laptop. Well, it didn't work at all. And it's probably, once again, still an issue with the UEFI. But I spent a couple of hours just trying to get it to point to the Windows installation and get it to run, but no go on that. But I did have a leftover 32 gigabyte M.2 mSATA drive and an adapter that had previously been in my 7130, my tablet. And so I was able to run that in a VM on my 7130. So the old installation that I had a couple of cool settings in there that worked out well. The only other thing I had to change was I had to remove the FS tab that I had set up to point to the SD card for the downloads folder. And it booted up, it runs smooth. I think I gave it about half the RAM and half the processor, and works really well for that type of thing. I do have the command that I had to run to get that to work. And let's see, it's sudo vbox manage internal commands create raw vmdk, that create raw vmdk is all one word, dash file name, and then I had to give it the root path to where VirtualBox stores the images, and then dash raw disk slash dev slash sdb1, which is where it was mapped at the time. And yeah, that worked great to just pull a disk from something else and run it in VirtualBox.
Nice.
Yeah, worked out great. But that's boring. Running, basically the exact same OS on the same device, except in a virtual machine. So I attempted to get Batacera running in a VM on my tablet. And for that one, it comes as .img, and I had to convert that to a VDI and then allocate virtual disk space and attempt to get it to run from there. Now, the Batacera Live CD actually works really well, and if you already have like a USB stick set up with all of your games on it in the proper folders, then you can actually point Batacera to that and have it run basically just off the live CD. And it was working pretty good there, but not in the VM. In setting it up in the VM, VirtualBox does have the ability to manage EFI. So I got that set, and it got through the splash screen, and then it hung. And I killed it. I gave it more RAM, gave it more processor, and let it try again. Let it sit for a good 20-30 minutes, and still just a blank screen after the splash screen. So I don't know what the issue ended up being with that, and I haven't gotten back around to it, and I probably won't. And I will talk about Batacera more once again in another section, because I really want to get into some of the nitty gritty of how awesome I think it is. And but also I wanted to mention I have set up a CentOS VM in VirtualBox because I did pick up that course from Udemy that was recommended to me last show. And it's working good so far. I'm not very far into the class yet, and I'll probably get back to everybody on how well that's going.
Yeah, that's cool. I kind of want to hear how your VirtualBox stuff goes, and I really want to hear how that course goes.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing that I think is really cool with VirtualBox is the ability to create a virtual machine and then move it to a physical disk and put it into another computer and let it run. And I've linked to a site that gave really detailed instructions on it, and I just wanted to bring those instructions here to you. It's kind of self-explanatory once you get through it, but you set up your VM, and once it's the way you want it, you get an image of Clonezilla. That's what they recommended. I'm sure you could probably do it with DD if you got a live CD. And you add that Clonezilla image to the VM, and you point that VM to one of your physical disks that's hooked up. And then you have to make sure that the boot order is for the Clonezilla image first. And then you just you boot into that, and you do the same standard things you would do to copy any other drive. And you copy the image on your VM over to a physical drive. Load that up into the machine that you want to have it in, and it's not going to work on that first boot. You're going to have to do an FSCK-Y. And then you're going to have to go into your /etc/udev/rules.d and delete the 70-persistent-net.rules and then reboot. Now, deleting that file forces it to reanalyze all of your network equipment, so that way it's not trying to get an Ethernet connection virtually. And then you'll be online and everything should work. And
That sounds awesome.
yeah, it does sound really cool. I haven't done that part of it yet.
That sounds a bit complicated to me, because in the past I've just copied the actual file that's in the VirtualBox folder for the virtual hard drive and just transferred that onto another machine, and then pointed the when you set up a new virtual machine, just use the existing image that you've already got of the hard drive. And I've done it with Windows XP, Windows 7, and apart from having on the Windows 7 having to validate the license, it works out the box without all that.
Well, like I said, I haven't done it. This is just from the write-up that I found on it.
It just seems a very complicated way of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
if
think
there's another
I've
way,
had
I'll
some.
give it a try.
Yeah, there's a convert. I don't think you have to do some of that. I think there is a VirtualBox, like that VBox manage command you were talking about before. There should be a convert disk image or something like that option that you can pass to it that'll change it from VMDK to VDI or whatever it is. But yeah, so I'll see if I can't look some of that up, and I'll drop it in Discord and Telegram and kind of keep up with it that way.
Yeah, can I just add something about VirtualBox?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been using VirtualBox for over 10 years now, and one of the big things for me is it's limited to PCs that it can emulate. It can only emulate Intel x86 or AMD 64 chips. So you cannot run something like Mac or MacOS in VirtualBox, or you can't run some of the other kind of fancy hardware, like you couldn't emulate a Pi. You've got to use other VMs for that.
Well, so
it does
the Mac thing you can do.
Well, you might be able to do with I'm thinking of PowerPC days. You would with Intel
true.
Mac OS, but not with PowerPC. But yes, it won't virtualize anything that's based on kind of the phone chips or other chipsets that aren't AMD or Intel, which is for most people wouldn't be a limitation, because most people, that's all they're wanting to virtualize anyway. But that is one limit of it. So if you want to limit to virtualize, say, an old Amiga or a Spectrum or something like that, you need to think about other ways of virtualizing those machines.
Yeah, definitely. Like virtualizes like, I guess, is kind of the idea there. So yeah, I spend a lot of time in VirtualBox as well. So the classes that I teach, this is the virtualizer of choice, the hypervisor of choice that I recommend to them. Mostly because there's none of this having to keep up with a license or whatever. And as far as I've been able to tell, it does everything that VMware Workstation does, except for VMware Workstation does a lot better on the graphics side of stuff. So if you're trying to virtualize a really heavy like graphical desktop, then you'll probably want VMware Workstation or something like that. But what's funny about that is that the only thing that I've noticed that it's been an issue on is Linux Mint Cinnamon. For some reason, it will always fall back to software rendering every single time you load up Cinnamon. So if I'm using it in class or if I'm recommending something to get people started in a VM, I would do Linux Mint Mate. Plus, it just runs faster a little bit in the VM anyway. So my job, I guess, this week was to talk a little bit about KVM, and I really kind of wanted this one because I've been using KVM for quite a while, and it's just one of those things that it's built in. It's part of the Linux system overall, and it really runs quite well. But what I don't have a lot of experience with on KVM is running it as a replacement for VirtualBox. Because with VirtualBox, I would assume most of the time you're trying to run a desktop and get a feel for, let's see what Plasma looks like and see what kind of changes they've made over the last few months or something. And with KVM, for me, the way that I had used it is typically just headless. So I would install it on a machine and then SSH in, and also use Virt Manager, which is a software that you can install on any machine in the network with your KVM box, and then remotely connect to your KVM box, and it would give you a full local GUI. But one thing that I realized at that time was because I was on Linux, there was no easy Virt Manager alternative for Windows. So this is just something that is just a shortcoming of Windows. The KVM is not a Windows thing, so why would the tooling be there? I had seen some stuff that would maybe give me the option to do it, but I really just failed down and did X forwarding on that. So you just go into your SSH configuration, turn on X11 forwarding, and then on your Windows side, you would install something like Xming, and that would allow you to receive the windows that would launch on the Linux side. So I would launch Virtual Manager or Virt Manager in an SSH connection or in an SSH terminal, and Virt Manager would pop up on my Windows box, all Linuxized and everything, and I would just control it that way, and it actually worked quite well. It would slow down maybe after I was using it for a couple hours or something, just kind of monitoring one of my VMs. It would slow down a bit, but killing the SSH connection and bringing it back up seemed to fix the issue. But anyway, so I was lamenting the loss of SCP with the release of SSH 8, and I'm going to lament the loss of Virt Manager here. So Red Hat has deprecated Virt Manager, and I've been using Virt Manager for years. So this is a software that I've become pretty intimately familiar with, and it just it's gone now. Well, it's not gone. You can still install it and use it for probably as long as the repos exist. But it's not getting any new features or anything like that. So the alternative to that is Cockpit. Yay! So I'm of two minds of this, right? Like, I love Virt Manager. It's great. It's compact. It's all it does. All it does is Virt VMs, whether they're remote or they're local. That's what it does. Now, Cockpit is a huge overarching system monitor / management / everything kind of thing. But Cockpit also integrates a plugin that allows you to do everything Virt Manager did inside the web interface of Cockpit. So half in, half out. I think it's going to be fine, to be honest. But I haven't really played with KVM in a while, so to get it to the point where I need to use Cockpit on it is probably going to take a little bit more tinkering. But here's the deal. You can still use Vert Manager, and I used Ubuntu 18.04 to test all of this, and I remembered back in the day, and I say back in the day, I think it's like Linux or Ubuntu 16.04 is the last time that I really dove into it. Installing KVM was kind of a pain, because you had to go figure out exactly which packages you needed and install all of these packages, which would bring in a bunch of other dependencies. And it turns out, with the invention or with the advent of GNOME boxes, you can just install GNOME boxes and then install Vert Manager on top of that, and it would give you all the bits and pieces that you need. So I've got the command in the show notes to how to install that, but it's just sudo apt install gnome-boxes space vert space manager, or vert-manager, sorry, and that was it. I was able to fire up Vert Manager. I was able to install or get a new VM up and running and install an operating system inside of it within about 10 minutes or so. So it was actually quite nice. So, but here's the deal. I don't use KVM on the desktop for a big reason. And that reason is it's really not meant for that. It's meant to be run, as I was talking about before, a bit on the headless side, where you're just virtualizing a bunch of VMs and you don't ever really look at it. The stuff just kind of goes along and hums along and you don't really worry too much about it. So for things like, we had a question in the Telegram group from Peter, I believe it was, but he had asked if I could go over some of how would you increase the VRAM, or virtual memory, or I'm sorry, video memory for a VM, because like with Windows, it prefers having like 64 megs or 128 megs of video memory to really fully run, and you can do it in KVM, but there's no GUI toggle for it. There is no, just go into the settings under video QXL and then just, change it from 16 to 128. There's none of that. You have to go find the XML file related to your VM, and you have to change it in a couple of different places in there. Now, I don't know about you, but if it is not easy to get to and very well documented, I'm doing my best not to touch it. But there's kind of a reason for this. And I think the people that use KVM for the desktop, so there is a use for this, and the biggest use is GPU pass-through. So this is the way that if you have two video cards in your computer, so say maybe you have an Intel chip with the integrated graphics in it, and you have a secondary video card. What you can do in this situation is run your Linux desktop off of the integrated graphics on your Intel or AMD chip, and then through KVM, pass your hardware through to a VM, say a Windows VM or something like that, and your Windows VM would have full access to the graphics card and would give you almost 100% performance parity as if you were running it native on Windows. So I would go so far as to say you're looking at 95% performance if you were to run this in a VM through pass-through. Run Windows in a VM using GPU pass-through. And at the bottom of this, I have a couple of different links. If you have an AMD GPU, I've got a link for you. If you've got an NVIDIA GPU, I've got a link for you. If you don't have either of those, I don't know what you're running, but it's probably going to be pretty niche. So there might be something that I could dig up for you. But I imagine that's 99% of anybody that's running anything. You've got one of those two cards. And it's quite good. I think Linus Tech Tips had done some stuff on it as well, so there are probably some videos that you can watch or at least get some pointers from them. And yeah, those two blog posts will kind of get you done. But either way, KVM is great to put on a server, a headless server, and shove it in the corner, and then run like 6 or 10 VMs on it, and then just remote into the thing whenever you need it, or install Cockpit on it and configure it from there. But unfortunately, it's missing a lot of the user type desktop features that VMware Workstation or VirtualBox would present to you. But as far as KVM goes, that's really all I've got. But Tony Hughes is going to talk a little bit more about KVM, but in a boxes kind of way.
Yeah. Sorry. I only found out about boxes last night when we were having our pre-show meetup, and you mentioned it, Leo, because I was talking about having installed Fedora 29 with the GNOME edition, and so I took a look at it. I installed it on the on one of my laptops, and while it's a nice bit of kit, but I was having all sorts of issues with it. It wouldn't install local ISO files that I had on my hard drive. I ended up getting them working to a certain extent by changing the extension to .img, and then it would boot the ISO, but it wouldn't allow me to. I could go through the install routine as you start it up from a live disk, but when I got to the hard drive, the virtual hard drive formatting part of the install, it crashed. It wouldn't allow the installer to format the drive. So while I could access the live image and play around with that, I couldn't actually install from a local ISO. So I ended up installing from one of the options on the within boxes, which is to download through the application. And I downloaded Debian 9 and then subsequently Ubuntu 18.10 as well. Debian 9 worked brilliant. It installed it, and when I checked out the resources that it put on it, it only allocated it 1 gig of RAM, but it was running sweet, absolutely sweet. I was really surprised at how low resources it needed to run really well. I then managed to get Ubuntu 18.10 working, and I was playing around with that. It seemed to be running fine. I tried to open a terminal to do sudo apt update, and it wouldn't open the terminal for some reason. So I've got a little bit of investigating to do within the virtual machine to find out why that's not working. But on first impressions, if I could get it working, properly, I would have thought GNOME boxes was a good alternative for running up a VM fairly quickly. I know Tony's tried it out. So, what do you think, Tony?
I tried it out and spent maybe less time than you did. We just talked about it yesterday. So I actually, just about an hour before record time, sat down and first installed Ubuntu. I didn't have anything running with GNOME, so I carved out a partition and installed Ubuntu 1904. Which doesn't come with Access by default, but it is in the App Store. And I gave it a go, but I didn't actually try installing. I was just using live ISO, so I didn't run into the issue that you did, Tony. But in the quick play that I had with it, I've used VirtualBox before, although it's been a couple of years. And the menus seem quite simplified, which I like. If I am going to, I don't have a lot of use for virtual machines. I think back when I used to use it, I was trying to avoid dual booting, and I would run Windows in a VM for specific things. Now, after having had this conversation with you all, I am aware of more uses than I had thought of. But in any case, I really liked it. It was very simple and stripped down, and there's not too many menu options to get in your way if you're just trying to spin up a VM and get on with it. So I look forward to attempting to actually install something, see if I can get through that, or if I run into the issues that you did, and have a little more hands-on. So far, I like it.
Yeah, that was one thing that I had kind of run into with Fedora 30, because I was really introduced to GNOME boxes. I knew it existed because I had heard it being talked about, but I didn't really try it until I gave Fedora 30 a spin about a month ago. And, I clicked on the button. I'm like, let's check it out. Let it download an ISO and let it install. So one of the great things about Fedora 30 is that if you're planning on using GNOME boxes, it works, and it works well. I was very surprised. But Tony, on your issue on Fedora 29, if it was installed through the Flatpak store, then that's why. I ran the Flatpak on Linux Mint, and man, anytime I tried to do anything with it, it just crashed. Like I would tell it download an ISO, it would download the ISO and then crash, and then I would feed it an ISO and then it would crash, and so I couldn't get it even loaded up with a VM. And while I was testing on Ubuntu 18.04, which I was planning on writing, all 28 of the packages that you need to install to get KVM running. But the first thing I wanted to do on 18.04 when I was testing was just try out GNOME boxes because it seemed like the simpler option. I was like, I'll have a little bit to talk about for the show anyway. And it turns out that when I installed it on Ubuntu 18.04, it allowed me to go through the process, that easy peasy process of getting it installed or getting the ISO fed to it and everything. But the moment I tried to launch the VM, it would crash. So I don't know what the difference is here, because what I did right after that was like, well, I've tried this every which way. I even Googled up a little support, and it turns out I made some changes that were recommended, like the KVM group was supposed to be number 78, but it was number 129 or something like that. So if you just change this configuration file to be slightly different, it would work. So I tried that. I tried adding my user to the KVM group, etc. I tried a bunch of different stuff, and none of it seemed to work. So I'm like, all right, I'm done with this GNOME boxes stuff, at least on Ubuntu 18.04. So I installed Virt Manager and was like, well, let's just see what errors it gives me, and I'll just work from there. And it didn't. Virt Manager just ran. So this is how I figured out that installing GNOME boxes alongside Virt Manager just gives you everything you need to run KVM as an alternative to VirtualBox or whatever. So anyway, long story short, Ubuntu 18.04 never let me use GNOME boxes properly, which is kind of a bummer. I really wanted to see how it worked. But anyway, Josh has some stuff about VMware.
Yeah, so this is kind of like my main virtualization platform that I use. So I use it in a few different ways. One of them is I have a HP ProLiant tower in my room that is used as an ESXi server. So basically, like, it's a dedicated machine for virtualization. So you can run any virtual machine. You just give it an ISO, and then it'll download it onto the server and then host it, and you can access it from anywhere, which is also helpful. But my website servers are all using vCloud Director, which is kind of like VMware in the cloud type of thing. I think it's quite I think there's a replacement for it now or something like that, but I'm not sure what it is. But I have 3 servers on there that each run virtual machines, and that's kind of how I use my web servers, managing them. So yeah, that's kind of like my server related stuff with VMware. I also took a 1 week VMware certified associate course. I think it was 2 years ago, and got the data center and virtualization kind of like certificate. I took the test for that, so that was quite interesting. So I have a bit of experience with VMware. VirtualBox, I haven't really used that, mainly because I'm used to VMware Workstation and Player. They're kind of like my go-to places for virtualization. So yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, I use I've been swooning about Cockpit for weeks and weeks and weeks now. But I do use ESXi at home, and it runs amazingly. I don't even have to think about it half the time. Upgrades are a little, you know what? The word unbearable, I think, is right.
Yeah.
It is not fun to upgrade an ESXi server as opposed to KVM, where it's just DNF upgrade or whatever. But yeah, I'm kind of considering dropping ESXi in favor of maybe CentOS 8 or something like that, running KVM instead, because it just the life cycle stuff seems to be a lot easier to deal with on the Linux side. But deep down in the ESXi server, it's a Linux kernel too, so it's not too terribly foreign. But I don't know. I've kind of gotten rid of a lot of things that aren't Linux anymore, and kind of slowly converted everything over to Linux, and this will be the last thing that I guess I need to do to actually get there. But anyway, ESXi is great. That's really just kind of my input to that.
Yeah, I've never actually updated it just because it looks too hard.
Oh my god, it's not fun. If you decide to do it and you need some help, let me know. It is not fun though. Have an extra flash drive handy.
Leo, just going back to the conversation a few minutes ago we were having on boxes. One of the things I discovered last night was there's actually an application in that's called Straightforward Boxes. So if you want to, if you've not got it already installed and you want to install through the terminal, you've got to type gnome-boxes with your apt or your DNF command for installation.
All right. And yeah, that's kind of what I ended up doing, and then installing Vert Manager on top of that seemed to be the good way to do it. But I don't know, Ubuntu didn't let me. It didn't let me start a VM up after doing that. So
Yeah,
I don't know. All right. Well, I think this is just going to be an ongoing conversation that we have, because if I decide to do the ESXi Fedora or CentOS switch, then yeah, this is just going to be a long, arduous journey of conversion. I'll have plenty more to talk about after that. And yeah, so if y'all end up talking about or diving more into boxes or any of these other virtualization softwares, I know we had Hyper-V mentioned in Telegram. I think maybe I prodded a little bit, but yeah, I plan on coming back around and talking about more of the virtualization stuff. So VMware Workstation, Hyper-V, etc., etc. We'll bring some of that stuff back in future episodes. But for now, we'll move on to the vibrations from the ether. So we got the first mail that was sent in by Kay Wisher, and Moss is going to take that one.
Yeah, Kay Wisher requested I post a picture of my hard drive showing which distro is on which partitions. It's in the show notes and also in the Distro Hoppers Digest MeWe group. So you can just look it up there.
Oh, cool. All right. And man, you got a lot of partitions. And these are all your operating systems?
Well, yeah, I've got 4 on the system.
Cool. I've always kind of wondered what your partition table looked like, and yeah, that's as that's as crazy as I expected it to be.
It works.
And, yeah, exactly. Hey, if it works,
As
it works.
you can see, my Linux Mint partition is almost half full, and the others just have little bits on it. I think I copied my music files over to Linux Mint so I didn't have to load my external to play music.
Oh, okay. All right, and then we got another email from Brad A, and this is directed to Moss, Leo, and Joe. So we'll hit these one at a time. Moss, if you want to take your section, I'll move on after you.
Okay, he says Moz, and I have emailed with him since, letting him know my name is not M-O-Z. I apologize if I wasn't clear. Bitwarden runs as a plugin for whatever browser you run. You can access it simultaneously from any and all devices that are running the add-on. For example, I have the add-on on my personal laptop, my desktop, and my work laptop, and have been simultaneously logged in on all 3 devices. For non-web passwords, I use the KeePassX, KeePassXC app. The nice thing about that app is that it stores all of the information in an encrypted database, which you can share around to all your devices.
Awesome. And he goes on to say to me, since Open Media Vault installation is on the fritz, can I suggest FreeNAS? It's based on FreeBSD, but is effectively an appliance, and ZFS protects your data better than ext4 or even ButterFS. So I had considered multiple times using FreeNAS, and for our storage at where I work, I think we've got, oh man, it's like 30 or 40 disks in a couple of different DASs that we will raid together, and I think I use RAID Z2. We may have done RAID Z3 this last refresh, but I do use FreeNAS at work. But one of the things that it just scares me away. We're still on FreeNAS 9 at work, and I have seen way too much gnashing of teeth about FreeNAS 11 and why doesn't this work, and it used to work in FreeNAS 9, and I tried to do an upgrade and blah blah blah. And just a lot of the rabble about that has just kind of got me skittish about FreeNAS overall. And the fact that, I personally cannot troubleshoot the GUI or something like that. So it just makes me, I don't know. And then, to be honest with you, that's really not a good argument because I'm going to Cockpit, which I couldn't troubleshoot that GUI even if my life depended on it either. But it would be Linux underneath, and I would be a lot more familiarized with the tooling on that side. So if this Fedora 30 server doesn't plan out the way that I want, I think FreeNAS is probably going to be where I go after that. Because as I was looking at it, the jails idea is pretty awesome, and I can set up Plex and all the other apps inside of there. The support plugin wise for FreeNAS is amazing. So everything OMV had, FreeNAS has, and then some. And you have to do a lot less work to get it working. So anyway, it'll be number 2 on my list. So we'll see how this goes. I'll keep you up to date.
And then I guess he messaged me, Joe, feel free to ping me if you want more info on setting up encryption with /boot on a thumb drive. I have been doing this for many years on Debian. Well, thank you. I do find that to be a very interesting way to be secure on a laptop or a tablet or a desktop, I guess. But I don't know if I'm going to be in a position to set it up anytime soon. But thank you.
Awesome. And then we have a couple more, and one of them is from Highlander. He says, regardless of whether you are using Windows or Linux, everyone should create offline backups of your most critical data, and here is why. He links to a CNN article about ransomware attacks in a lot of different U.S. cities. And yeah, I mean, ransomware, it'll encrypt your stuff, and you won't be able to get it without paying some amount of money, and there's no telling if you're going to get the key or not. So anyway, back your stuff up and unplug it from your computer when you're not backing stuff up, and you're going to be just fine.
Well, in my case, as I said, I keep all my data on an external, and most of the time that external is turned off.
There you go. As long as it's not plugged in and accessible during the time you get infected, it will not be encrypted. So you're good.
Okie-dokie.
Then we got one last one from Christopher P. From mintcast.org. He says, to add a podcast to Spotify, all you have to do is add the RSS feed Spotify podcast at, and then he gives us a URL, podcasters.spotify.com/submit. Sweet.
Yeah, I think this one was aimed at me and Moss about creating the RSS feed for distro hoppers. So I have subsequently managed to cobble something together that actually feeds to people's podcatchers, but it's not in Spotify.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Tony. Someone also sent us some stuff about how to get on iTunes. So
yes, that's right.
That's the one you want to do too, because I think a lot of things are based on that, even outside of the iTunes ecosystem, even some open source podcatchers based on iTunes feeds.
Yeah, it gives you more options when you're searching for podcatcher within a podcatcher for titles. If it's in iTunes, you're more likely to pick it up.
Cool. Let's head to the check this out section, and we'll go over some of the cool stuff that we found over this past fortnight. So I've got a few things, and one of the things that has just bugged the crap out of me for years and years and years is when you boot into Linux, your clock is fine because Linux cares about the clock. And when you boot into Windows on a dual boot system, your clock is off by however many hours off you are from GMT, right? Or UTC. So what's up with that? Well, the idea is that Windows and Linux use a different clock. And the easiest way, so you can fix this by changing the registry in Windows, but Yeah, I don't know. Changing that, don't do it. The easier way to do this is to use timedate.ctl, a command in the Linux terminal to allow you to adjust your system clock to using the local real-time clock as opposed to the hardware clock or something like that, I believe. But anyway, so I've got a command to turn it on, which will adjust your clock to match what Windows is reporting. And if you want to try it out and boot into Windows and see if it works and just give it a go, that's great. I have the way to revert back in right underneath that as well here in the show notes. So if you want to try it out, go for it. I think I'm going to try it out over the weekend, or what's left of the weekend, and see how it works for me. And also have our different chats have started to blow up over the past couple of weeks, which is awesome. I think yesterday, like, I had disconnected over Saturday, and then I came back to the Telegram, and there was like 100-something messages, and I was like, oh god, now I got to get caught up on all this SSD stuff. So anyway, some of the cool stuff that I've pulled out this week is one of our listeners in Discord, Kat, has put together a set of instructions, and I think this is going to tickle Bo's fancy once he comes back on the show. But this is a set of instructions that are very well written, very well commented out, that really kind of gives you an idea of how to get through the entire art setup from start to finish. I think she uses a couple of different things like ButterFS for various reasons, but I think a lot of that stuff, if you decide, I don't want ButterFS, I want ext4, or I want ZFS instead, or whatever, you can very easily manipulate some of the options that she's got in there. But either way, go take a look and see what it's like to set up an art system. Even if you don't do one, even if you don't spin up one yourself, it's really cool. And then my last thing is another listener, Oliver from our Discord, has been busy writing, streaming, chatting, and everything else. I was watching his Counter-Strike stream yesterday. It was pretty cool. And he's been writing a little bit about Linux Mint overall and kind of keeping us abreast of what's going on his side of stuff. And I've got a link to his most recent story that talks about Mint and his conversion from Windows. It's a good read. There's about 4 articles right about now, and yeah, it's definitely worth a look. So go check that out. And then Moss, you've got some stuff for us.
Yeah, we've had more companies buying into the LVFS for firmware updates. LVFS is a Linux vendor firmware service, which is a secure portal which allows hardware vendors to upload firmware updates. So all of these BIOS upgrades that you've had to say, but I can't boot Windows on this just to do my stupid BIOS upgrade, you can do it through LVFS now. There's no charge to vendors. Right now they've got almost all the major hardware vendors have bought into it. I know HP and Lenovo, and I think Entroware was in. I don't see a list here on the website. Say Dell is definitely bought in. So that should be a good thing for all of us that might want to look at our BIOS upgrades. In other news, Distro Hopper's Digest is up to 104 downloads as of yesterday, so we're in 3 digits, folks. Thank you very much.
Woohoo!
Congrats.
And we got Josh with some. Oh, that's right. This is the video that you posted, right?
Yeah. So this popped up in my suggested on YouTube. It's titled "Tech Support Scammer versus Linux Mint." It's quite funny. I actually have followed this channel for a while. It's called Lewis's Tech, and what he basically does is he goes on the internet to find some tech support scammer. So like people who try to put scam software on people's computers and fake their identity and then try and steal money from people. It's a quite nasty business, really. And what he does is he does something called scam baiting, which is actually a very legal thing to do, where you basically call these people up and then kind of like use like a virtual machine and see what these people do, and then you'll be able to report them to the authorities, and then get them found out and stuff like that. But he tries to have a bit of fun with the videos. So this particular one is instead of using Windows, which is what the scammer expects you to be using, he uses Linux Mint, and it's a very funny video going through what the so he tries to use all these sort of like Windows commands, tries to get into Event Viewer, and all those sort of things that don't exist on Linux, and it's just a generally funny thing. So it's an interesting video to watch if you're up for that sort of thing.
Very nice. And Joe's got some stuff a little bit more about Batacera.
Yep. I wanted to put this in the check it out section because if you're not listening to Ubuntu podcast, you should be. And this is Ubuntu podcast, season 12, episode 4. And they did talk about Batacera Linux, which it looks exactly like RetroPie, except it's for a lot more devices. They have a couple of different Odroids that you can install it on. They have a 32-bit version of it for older computers, and then they have a 64-bit version of it. And I installed the 64-bit version onto my old ThinkPad, the X120E, whose processor scores about 750 on Passmark, if I remember right. And it works great. Now, I had it playing NES games, SNES, MAME games, Neo Geo. I haven't done PlayStation yet. I'm still working on that, on getting some images and getting them moved onto there. But I'm assuming it's an OpenGL issue, but it will not play N64 games right now. And I was really hoping to play 007 because that's one of those games that you can never get to work right on the Pi with RetroPie. And also, I let when I went to the lug yesterday, I let my daughter play on that using the Xbox One controller because I didn't think she'd be overly interested in the lug itself. And she played on there for a good 2 hours and all the different games and enjoyed it. Now, there's still, some Neo Geo games that won't load, and like I said, none of the N64s will load. The PC Engine stuff will load, but then the control system is not correct. But still, it works. And there's only 120 gig SSD on that little drive, so I might delete the N64 stuff for now before I start putting the PlayStation images over there. And I mentioned it earlier, I'm going to bring it up again. It does have a fully functioning Kodi on it as well. And it looks good. I haven't used it too much yet, but I'd like to see if it will accept extensions the way a regular Kodi install would. And that's really all I have on that.
Nice. This sounds really great for old laptops that are lying about.
Yeah, I
like
think I'm going to
said,
use it too.
the X120E, I think it's probably a 10-year-old system. Maybe.
I have a number
I don't know.
of
I'd have to
those.
look it up.
Yeah, very cool.
Awesome. Well, I think that'll do it for our Check This Out. And the only announcement that we have is the next episode is going to be on June 2nd, 2019. Unless something blows up, I guess. So now that we're at the end of the show, let's let everybody know how they can get in touch with us outside of the live chat and all of that kind of good stuff. So, Joe, where can we hear more of you?
Well, I am on a couple other podcasts, and you can find those at www.tllts.org, and that's the Linux Link Tech Show. And I'm also on the Linux Lugcast, which is www.linuxlugcast.com. You can find me on MeWe, or you can send me an email at jb@mintcast.org. Although I have been looking at that less because I've been extremely busy.
Awesome. And Moss, where can we get more of you?
Well, I've got websites at Triad Bardic College and Peaceful Hippo. You can find me all over MeWe. My music is on Bandcamp. And you can email me, moss@mintcast.org. All those links are in the show notes.
Very nice. And Tony Hughes, more of you.
Yeah, you can get me on Hacker Public Radio, and there's a link in the show notes to where you can find me on there. I've got an occasional blog at tony-hughes.blogspot.com. I'm on Twitter, TonyH1212. And of course, we've got our mintcast email address, th@mintcast.org. And I'm also available with Moss through distrohoppersdigest@gmail.com.
Awesome. And you can find me at leochavez.org, where I just posted a new post, which I totally forgot to talk about in the Wanderings. And at Leo Chavez on Twitter. Email me at leo@mintcast.org, and you can hear a little bit more of me on the Full Circle Weekly News podcast. And Josh, where can we find you?
You can find me edgeblocks.org, all about code on Twitter, and I have no mintcast email, so if you wanted to get in touch with me, it's josh@edgeblocks.org.
We should fix
that. Yeah, we should fix that. And Tony Watts, where can we find more of you?
You can reach me at tw@mintcast.org, and on the musical pursuits side of things, if you want to check out Echoes of Savages and all the places you might care to look, you can find me there too.
Very cool. And before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. We're still thanking Josh for working on redesigning our website, setting up the YouTube stream, and providing tons of technical help. Archive.org for hosting our audio files. The folks at Hacker Public Radio for the mobile server we use to communicate. Bytemark Hosting for providing the new hosting server for the website. And the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about every fortnight.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem and Co.
Oh, and we forgot to drop a link for the
This has been another episode of the mintCast podcast. The show notes for this episode are at mintcast.org. You can send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. You can find more information about Linux Mint at www.linuxmint.com. You can follow both mintCast and Linux Mint on Twitter at mintcast and at Linux_Mint. Thanks to Mark Blasco at podcastthemes.com for our theme music, and thanks for listening to this episode of the mintCast.